All right, so we have a kind of Desmos activity that will help you learn how to manipulate shapes today. This is kind of crucial element of our art project. So if you go to Google Classroom, make sure to click on the classwork tab, um, go down to the day 2 for equation art, and you'll find this little activity here, Desmos Patrick Stars, right above that video that you guys are watching right now. So if you click on that link, that will take you to this little Desmos thing here. Now, a lot of you are simply going to copy paste different equations. A lot of you are going to copy and paste existing images from the internet in order to kind of trace lines and give yourself a foundation for those art shapes. So, um, what we did in class today was learning how to manipulate polynomial curves in order to kind of hit some of these shapes that we see around Patrick Star. And so I'm going to start with this bottom left shape. Let's start by, in our equation bar here over on the left, just click below that Patrick Star thing, and we're going to type in y equals x raised to the second power. And remember that that raised button to get the exponent is to do shift 6. You can also, if you wanted to, click this keypad down here to help you access exponents if needed. I'm going to change the color here just by holding on that circle, changing it to blue, so I can see it a little better. We notice that, all right, I have this shape here that roughly looks like the shape of Patrick's left leg, but I need to move it downwards to the left and maybe change the shape a little bit. So if I wanted to move it downwards, I can simply subtract, let's say 4, see how we get. Okay, 4 brings us somewhat close. We probably need to go a little further. Let me check with 5. So subtract 5 now, and that probably overshot it a bit. So we could continue guessing and checking to kind of hone in on a value and hit that spot, or we can do something that Desmos allows us to do called sliders. So instead of this -5, I'm going to change it to a plus a letter D, and you'll notice how this button popped up for add slider. I'm going to click that button. When I do that, we get a nice shape, and below our equation, we also get this slide bar that we can click and drag this point up and down and really hone in on an accurate spot for where we think that leg is going to be. So in this case, I got it to D equals -4.6. So now that we have our height lined up appropriately for the leg, we want to move our parabola or the quadratic formula left a little bit. So we're going to make another modification to our equation. We're going to go in there and we're going to type parentheses around our x. And then inside of it, we're going to have x minus the letter c. We have another opportunity to add a slider here. So this pops up with a default value of c equals 1. See if I slide this to the left and right, my shape moves left and right. I'm going to try to focus it in on Patrick's left leg. Let's say that's somewhat close right now. So we have two sliders. We have C, which allows us to move left and right horizontally. We have D, which allows us to move up and down. If I zoom in on the leg here to see how close I am, you can see that it's pretty sloppy work as I look closer. So maybe I want to shift this right a little more. Probably a little too far. Okay, right there, that seems centered okay. And it does seem like it's up and down all right, but notice how towards the edges, I get some gaps. My line's a little too wide for his leg. So there's one more thing we're going to add to our equation to help us shift that scale or that shape, and it's going to be out in front. We're going to type in A out in front and add a slider for that. And if we move the slider around, you'll see that it changes how wide or narrow, and sometimes even flips that shape that we have. So I'm going to kind of hone in on a value of, let's say, 1.4 seems pretty darn good. Right? It's not maybe perfect, but it's pretty good for what we are working on here today. So now that I have these A values, a C value, this D value locked in, I can go ahead and replace it in my original equation. That A becomes 1.4. That C becomes what we have, that negative 0.7. Notice how now there's now a double negative in our equation. And that D becomes the negative 4.6. So that's locked in. And now no matter what I do to these sliders, that line, if you play around with them, is staying exactly where it is. That line's locked. So we could add another equation just like the one before, y equals a parentheses x minus c parentheses 6 for our exponent, raises the second power, plus d. We have a new equation that pops up. Let me zoom back out. Notice now we have this black line that I can start moving around as well. And I can maybe target other aspects of Patrick. Let me change this to a green so we can see it a little better. And as I move these sliders, I can adjust the different shapes. Maybe I want to target Patrick's right leg this time, or maybe I want to target Patrick's head. If I change this A slider to a negative value, my shape goes upside down, and I can start focusing in on Patrick's head shape here. And once that gets about appropriate, I can maybe lock that in and move on to different aspects of Patrick. So the final thing that we learned here today in class is how to add restrictions. So I'm going to delete my green line. I'm going to zoom back in on my blue line. And we learned this in a Desmos activity, but here's a quick summary here. This blue line that we're happy with, it's great, but it goes a little too far. So we want to add a restriction to it. So if you click over on the right and add in 2 curly brackets, these are kind of on the right side of your keyboard and will require the shift key. We'll add some curly brackets. Inside that, we're going to restrict the value of x. We want to go from this left point here, approximately where I'm at. If we click on our line, we'll kind of see where we're at. Looks like negative 1.5. We can go negative 1.5. We're going to say that's less than x. It's going to be less than, should figure out what our rightmost point is first. Our rightmost point probably is going to be, I think 0. X of 0 looks pretty good. Is less than 0. Now we have a nice little leg line here that even if I got rid of Patrick's star, we have a nice foot shape for Patrick's leg.